My name is David. I found pregnancy test buried deep in the trash can in the master bathroom, hidden beneath a heap of crumpled tissues and an empty bottle of shampoo. Positive. Two bold pink lines stared back at me, as unmistakable as a slap to the face. For a moment, my hands froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think, just stood there holding it, my brain scrambling to make sense of the glaring evidence. My wife, and hadn't said a word, not a single hint, and the realization hit me like a freight train. We weren't trying for a baby. In fact, and had been avoiding intimacy for months. Headaches, late nights at work, needing space. She had an endless arsenal of excuses. Yet, here was proof. Proof not just of a pregnancy, but of something far more sinister. My chest tightened as anger and disbelief collided inside me, leaving me breathless. And wasn't careless. She never was. She had a way of being calculating, always 10 steps ahead, never leaving loose ends. So, if she'd let this slip, it was either sheer arrogance or confidence that I'd never find it, or worse, that I wouldn't put two and two together. I didn't confront her. Not right away. That would have been reckless, playing right into her hands, and was a master manipulator. If I came at her without hard evidence, she'd twist the narrative, flipping the blame until I was the one apologizing by the end of it. No, I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Instead, I carefully replaced the test exactly as I found it, every piece of trash arranged as if it had never been disturbed. Then I walked out of the bathroom, my face calm, my hands trembling at my sides. My entire world had shifted in those few moments, but I couldn't let her see it. I had to play it cool. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly as I listened for her movements upstairs. When she finally came down, her hair still damp from a shower, she didn't even glance in my direction. She poured herself a coffee and casually scrolled through social media, her demeanor so unbothered it made my blood boil. She acted like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just stumbled across evidence of her betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw her coffee mug against the wall and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I gave her a smile that felt as forced as it was hollow. "You look like you slept well," I said, my voice steady. "Big day at work?" And glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable, then shrugged. "Same old. Meetings, deadlines, the usual." The casual way she lied made my stomach churn. She was good at it, effortless. But if she thought I was just some oblivious husband who'd blindly take her at her word, she was about to learn otherwise. I'd figure out exactly what she was hiding, and when I did, she'd regret ever underestimating me. That night, sleep eluded me. Not because of doubt, I knew what I'd seen, but because my mind was in overdrive, and was playing a game, and if I was going to beat her, I needed to learn the rules. Lying there in the dark, listening to her soft, even breaths as she slept beside me, I couldn't shake the image of that test. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but deep down, I already knew better. By morning, I had a plan. I'd start small, watch her, study her patterns, gather evidence, let her think she was in control. People like and got careless when they thought they'd already won. I just had to bide my time. At breakfast, she was all smiles, even planting a kiss on my cheek, which felt like an insult now. She had no idea I was watching her every move. I noticed how she clung to her phone, an unusual habit for her. Normally, she'd leave it on the counter or toss it onto the coffee table without a second thought. But today, it was practically glued to her hand. She even took it with her to the bathroom, a habit I'd never seen before. "Everything okay?" I asked casually as she stepped out of the bathroom for the third time that morning. "You've been in there a lot lately." And froze for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. Then, with a quick laugh, she waved it off. "Just some stomach issues. Probably that sushi we had the other night." It was a lie. We hadn't eaten sushi in weeks. I nodded, pretending to buy it, but my resolve only hardened. If she was lying about something as trivial as that, what else was she lying about? When she left for work later that day, I decided to dig deeper. I'd never been the type to snoop, but this wasn't paranoia. This was survival. I started with the trash, sifting through every crumpled receipt, every discarded scrap. That's when I found it. A receipt from a boutique in the next town over, dated just 2 days prior. The items listed made my stomach sink. Luxury candles, silk lingerie, and a bottle of men's cologne. She hadn't bought any of those things for me. That much was obvious. But for who? And why? My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the receipt, my suspicions taking a darker turn. That evening, I decided to test her. We were sitting on the couch, watching a mindless reality show, when I casually asked, "So, who's the cologne for?" Her head snapped toward me, her expression briefly flickering between confusion and panic. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp. I held up the receipt, watching her closely. "This, from Tuesday. I didn't realize you went shopping." Her eyes widened for a split second before she laughed, brushing it off. "Oh, that. It's for my boss. His birthday's coming up. The team pitched in for a gift. I didn't think it was a big deal." It was a good lie. Quick. Believable. But not good enough. Not anymore. "Nice of you to take the lead on that," I said with a smile, pretending to let it go. "I'm sure he'll appreciate it." And relaxed, leaning back into the couch with a relieved sigh. She thought she was off the hook, completely unaware that I was already 2 steps ahead. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about making sure that, when the truth came out, she wouldn't be able to twist her way out of it. When Ann came home that evening, she was all smiles, her arms laden with takeout bags. She looked like the perfect, doting wife. A picture so flawless it was almost comical. She breezed into the kitchen, setting the bags on the counter, and leaned in to kiss me on the cheek as if she hadn't spent the morning laughing over lattes with her mystery man. "I got your favorite," she chirped, pulling out containers of barbecue ribs and mac and cheese. "Figured we could have a nice dinner together. You've been working so hard lately." Her voice was light, cheerful, dripping with just the right amount of concern. It was almost Oscar-worthy. I forced a smile, my tone equally pleasant. "That's thoughtful of you." "Thanks, Ann." The way her eyes sparkled with self-satisfaction made my stomach churn. She thought she had me completely fooled, that I'd sit there, eating her ribs, smiling like a dutiful husband while she played house. But tonight, I wasn't just pretending to be clueless. I was laying the groundwork for what was coming. Over dinner, I studied her every move. She filled the silence with exaggerated small talk, asking about my day, cracking jokes about her inept boss, and laughing a little too loudly at her own stories. It was a performance, carefully orchestrated to distract me from the truth. I matched her energy, playing the part of the unsuspecting spouse, even sharing a story about an annoying coworker. The more relaxed she became, the more confident I felt about my next move. After we finished eating, I gathered the plates and rinsed them off in the sink, and leaned against the counter, her phone in hand, scrolling absent-mindedly. As I dried my hands on a dish towel, I asked casually, "So, how's work these days? You seem busier than ever." She didn't look up. "Oh, you know, same old grind. Deadlines, client meetings, the usual." I kept my voice steady, my face neutral. "Must be tough, juggling all that. Late nights, early mornings." "I'm impressed." That got her attention. She glanced up, her smile faltering just slightly. "It's not that bad," she said quickly, her tone just a little too dismissive. "Besides, I'm doing it for us, right? Building our future." "Right," I said, nodding. "Like this morning. You had that coffee meeting, didn't you?" Her grip on her phone tightened. The hesitation was brief, but I caught it. She laughed, a touch too loudly. "Oh yeah, just some networking thing. Nothing exciting." "Networking," I echoed, folding my arms and leaning back against the counter. "Sounds cozy." Her smile thinned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "David, what's with the 3rd degree? It was just a work thing." "Why are you making it sound weird?" asked she. I raised my hands in mock surrender. "Not at all. Just curious, that's all." She watched me closely, trying to gauge whether I was onto her. After a tense pause, she shrugged and muttered something about me being paranoid before turning back to her phone. But I wasn't paranoid. I was methodical. That night, as Ann slept soundly beside me, I stayed up, staring at the photos I'd taken earlier that day. Each image was like a dagger to the chest, and, smiling at Luke, leaning in close, her hand brushing his. And then the kiss. The undeniable kiss that shattered any hope I'd been clinging to. There was no misunderstanding. No innocent explanation. This was real. This was betrayal. I didn't sleep that night, not because of anger, but because I was planning, and had spent months spinning her web of lies, but she didn't realize I was about to set the whole thing ablaze. The next morning, I decided it was time to shift gears. Watching and waiting had served its purpose, but now I needed leverage. While she was at work, I took the next step, and wasn't exactly a tech genius, and her passwords were laughably predictable. Within minutes, I had installed a tracking app on her laptop, giving me access to her email and calendar. Her inbox was revealing, to say the least. Buried among the work emails and newsletters were messages from someone named Luke R. The emails weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. The tone, playful and full of inside jokes, told me everything I needed to know. Luke wasn't just a colleague or a friend. He was him, the man from the cafe. And then I found her calendar. It was meticulously organized, filled with work meetings and personal events. But one entry stood out. Friday, 3 p.m., Dr. Carlson. Prenatal checkup. Prenatal checkup. My heart stopped. She hadn't just lied about being pregnant. She was actively managing her pregnancy behind my back. The weight of her betrayal crushed me, but instead of letting the fury take over, I focused. This wasn't just a slip-up on her part. This was my chance to gather irrefutable proof. Later that day, I turned my attention to Luke. His email signature listed his company and title, so it didn't take long to track him down. His LinkedIn profile filled in the blanks. Senior consultant. High-end firm. Married. 2 kids. Perfect. Luke had just as much to lose as Anne. If he thought he could stroll into my life, ruin my marriage, and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn how wrong he was. By the time Anne came home that evening, I'd already begun laying the groundwork for what was coming. She walked through the door, looking exhausted but calm. "Hey," she said, rummaging through the fridge for a bottle of water. "How was your day?" I smiled, keeping my tone casual. "Not bad. How about yours?" She shrugged, her back still turned. "The usual. Meetings all day. I'm wiped." I forced a laugh. "Glad to hear it's nothing too exciting. By the way, I was thinking of running a few errands Friday afternoon. That's okay with you?" She barely looked up. "Of course. Do whatever you need to." She had no idea I'd seen her calendar. No idea I knew about her appointment, or that I planned to be there. "I'm not as stupid as you think I am." Her face froze, and for the first time, I watched the color drain from Anne's carefully composed expression. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, letting the thumbnail of the video from the clinic glare back at her like a spotlight in a dark room. I didn't even need to press play. It was enough. Her eyes darted from the phone to my face, and for a second, her mask slipped. Panic crept into her voice as she hissed, "What the hell is that?" "Oh, you know exactly what this is," I replied, my tone laced with mockery. "I followed you, Anne. I saw everything. The clinic, Luke, the cozy little chat with the doctor about your prenatal plans. You've been busy, haven't you?" "Keep your voice down," she whispered harshly, glancing around the restaurant, her panic now fully evident. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a low, measured whisper. "Let me guess. You were planning to pin the baby on me, right? Play happy family while sneaking off to see Luke whenever it suited you? Or was he going to stay in the shadows? Your dirty little secret I wasn't supposed to figure out?" And opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in months, she looked powerless, and I had to admit, it was intoxicating. "Here's the deal," I continued, my voice calm but carrying the weight of every betrayal. "I've got everything. Photos, videos, emails, you name it. So, you've got 2 options. Option 1. You come clean, right here, right now, and we figure out where this train wreck goes from here. Option 2. I get up, walk out, and send everything to Luke's wife. What's it going to be?" Her face twisted into a mask of fury and fear, her veneer of charm crumbling. For the first time, the real Anne was on display. the cold, calculating liar who thought she could control everything. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, venom dripping from every word. I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. "Try me." For a moment, she just stared at me, the glow of the candlelight flickering against her now pale face. Her red lipstick, so perfect when she arrived, was smudged, as though the weight of the moment had physically worn her down. She glanced around the restaurant, searching for an escape route, but there was none. Not this time. "You don't know what you're doing, David," she whispered sharply, her tone desperate and biting. "This is my life. You can't just—" "Your life?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through hers like a blade. "Funny. I thought it was our life. But clearly, you've been building something else on the side. Don't you think it's time I got to know the full story?" Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her fork down, the sound of metal on porcelain ringing through the heavy silence. "Fine," she spat through gritted teeth. "You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I've been seeing Luke. But it's not what you think." I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter enough to make the couple at the next table glance over. "Not what I think. Are you serious, San? I followed you to the clinic. I saw you with him. You're carrying his child. For God's sake. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" Her expression hardened, the panic in her eyes replaced by something colder. "You don't get it," she snapped. "Luke, he's different. He understands me in ways you never could. You've been so boring, David. So predictable. I needed more." There it was. The knife in the chest. She didn't just want to excuse what she'd done. She wanted to hurt me, to make me feel like her betrayal was my fault. And the worst part? She was enjoying it. I sat back, nodding slowly, her words sinking in like poison. "Boring," I repeated quietly. "Predictable. That's why you did this? Because you got tired of the man who supported you, who built a life with you. You decided to play house with someone else because you were bored?" "You're twisting this," she snapped, her voice rising despite her earlier attempts to stay quiet. "I needed something different. Something exciting. And don't act like you're some perfect saint. You've been distant, wrapped up in your own world for months." I let her words hang in the air for a long moment before leaning forward, locking eyes with her. "You want to talk about being distant?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "How about you shutting me out for months? Lying to my face? Plotting to make me raise another man's child? Is that exciting enough for you?" Her face turned red, her anger and embarrassment colliding. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. We both knew there was no defense for what she'd done. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen, bringing up the video from the clinic. "You see this?" I said, holding it up for her to see. "This is my insurance policy. The moment you try to twist this or lie to me again, this goes straight to Luke's wife. And trust me, and I'll hit send without a second thought." Her defiance cracked. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. "You wouldn't," she whispered, but the waver in her voice betrayed her doubt. "Try. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let us know in the comments." I wasn't about to rebuild the life and destroyed. Let her face the consequences. Let her run to Luke or hide under whatever rock she'd crawl to next. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. The silence in the house felt different now. Peaceful, almost sacred. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think without the weight of her lies suffocating me. I started focusing on myself in ways I hadn't in far too long. I picked up my guitar again, rediscovering the joy in strumming chords and letting music fill the house. Every morning, I'd lace up my running shoes and hit the trails, the cool dawn air cleansing me of the bitterness that had settled in my chest. I even reconnected with old friends who had always quietly wondered what I ever saw in Anne. They'd never said it outright, but their surprise when I announced our marriage all those years ago had been impossible to miss. Now, their support felt like a lifeline. The weight of her betrayal didn't vanish overnight. It lingered, like a dull ache in a healing wound. But it no longer defined me. It became just a scar, a marker of what I'd endured and how far I'd come. One afternoon, as I was organizing my office, I stumbled across an old photo of Anne and me. It was from the early days of our marriage. We were smiling, carefree, and wrapped up in a version of love that now felt like it belonged to strangers. I stared at the picture for a long moment before tossing it into the shredder. That chapter of my life was over. I wasn't the same person anymore, and I had no intention of looking back. As for Anne and Luke, their story unraveled just as I knew it would. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their so-called spark fizzled under the weight of guilt, shame, and the wreckage they'd left behind, and moved to a different city, likely trying to outrun the fallout of her choices. Luke's reputation at work took a nosedive after Christine, his now ex-wife, aired their dirty laundry for all to see. If you ask me, it was poetic justice. This whole ordeal taught me something I never expected to learn. Betrayal doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you. It forces you to see the cracks in your foundation and decide what kind of person you want to be moving forward. I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone, but in a strange way, I'm grateful for it. It stripped away the illusions and dead weight in my life, leaving me with a clarity I hadn't realized I needed. It made me stronger, smarter, and more focused than ever before. By the time I finished rebuilding my life, and was nothing more than a faint memory, and me, I was finally free. Life didn't just move on, it flourished. The scars of her betrayal faded into something I could look at without flinching. They weren't marks of pain anymore. They were reminders of how far I'd come. As I focused on my career, everything seemed to fall into place. The work I'd poured myself into, even during the darkest moments, began to pay off in ways I hadn't expected. Projects I spearheaded gained recognition, and opportunities one hadn't dared dream of before came knocking. I built a name for myself, respected, steady, and independent. For the first time in years, I was proud of what I'd accomplished without anyone else's shadow lingering over me. And then, when I least expected it, she came into my life. Her name was Emily. She wasn't like Anne, no polished veneer, no practiced charm. She was genuine in a way I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. We met at a charity event I almost didn't attend. I'd been hesitant to start dating again, but Emily didn't feel like a risk. She felt like a breath of fresh air. She was funny, compassionate, and whip-smart, with a sharp wit that kept me on my toes. We started as friends, long conversations over coffee, shared laughter at old movies, and walks that stretched into the twilight hours. There was no pretense with her, no games. She didn't try to impress me, and she didn't need to. She was simply herself, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself trusting someone again. Our relationship grew naturally, without pressure or expectation. When she smiled, it wasn't calculated. It was real, and it felt like coming home. Emily reminded me what love was supposed to feel like. Easy, steady, and unwavering. I didn't have to wonder where I stood with her. I just knew. We built a life together, one rooted in honesty and respect. There was no looking over my shoulder, no second-guessing. She understood my past without judgment and stood beside me as I shaped a brighter future. With Emily, I wasn't rebuilding. I was building something entirely new, something that felt unshakable. My career flourished alongside our relationship. The business I'd poured my heart into expanded, and I took risks that paid off in ways I couldn't have anticipated. With Emily's support, I started a mentoring program for young professionals in my field, giving back to the community that had supported me through my toughest times. The sense of purpose it gave me was more fulfilling than I'd ever thought possible. Looking back, I don't regret what I went through with Anne. It was a hard, painful lesson, but it led me here, to a life I could be proud of, a career that thrived, and a love that was real. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the hardest endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. I found happiness again, not because I chased it, but because I built it, brick by brick, choice by choice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. I was too busy living in the present, with Emily by my side and a future I couldn't wait to embrace.